Well, I hope you've learned a little bit about the different styles of research this week, and I want to just close out with some final thoughts about these different styles and when to use them. So it's never immediately obvious if you need to use an exploratory, descriptive, or causal research design unless you have a really, really good idea of what it is that you're trying to learn. But even then, sometimes what you think you're going to learn is not what you actually learn, and there can be need to circle back and try a different design or to augment the research you've done with more research. And so it's a good idea to try to think through as many of the different avenues as possible so that you can make sure that you're budgeted appropriately and that you also are not expecting one study to solve all of your problems when you might need 2 or 3. So first of all, when you're selecting a style of research, you need to think about whether you really need primary or secondary research. Remember that primary research is a lot more expensive and time-consuming than secondary research, and secondary research, if it can be close enough to what you're dealing with, can sometimes be the better option. And if we're going to use secondary research, we can get away a lot more with doing exploratory or descriptive methods than we can with causal. You also need to think about, are the data that you're looking for going to need to be quantitative, qualitative, or some combination of both, which was what we call pluralistic or hybrid research. If you're looking for numbers, then you need a descriptive study. If you're looking for numbers that suggest cause and effect, you need a causal study. And if you're looking for depth and detail, you're going to need an exploratory study most of the time, although you might need some descriptive research to go along with it. If you're looking to get a lot of bang for your buck, you probably need to do some hybrid or pluralistic research, because quantitative and qualitative often leave a lot of questions along with the answers that they provide. You need to think about the scope too. How much data do you really need to understand something? Do you need to go out and interview 3,000 people to get a low margin of error? Or do you need to talk to 30 people to just get a basic understanding of something? The scope is really important, as is the scale. You know, what are you trying to do with the data? Are you trying to take the data and just go and present it at a short meeting with your management team? Or are you trying to scale it to your entire group of consumers while you're working on research and development of a new product or service? You need to think about that, because if you're doing a study that's smaller in scope and scale, you don't need as much research, and you might be able to get away with using something that is less structured or that's less rigorous, and maybe that is more focused on exploratory information or that can rely on secondary data. What sampling style is desired is also an important question, particularly if you are planning on projecting your data out to a larger population. So again, the rule of thumb is that a random sample can generally be projected out. A non-random sample is pretty much just able to describe the sample from which it's drawn. Again, there are times where it's completely appropriate not to project your data, where just hearing what a large group of people have to say is enough to make your decision. A random sample often costs a lot more time and money than a non-random sample, and it's often a lot easier to get very high quality data from a non-random sample of highly engaged users or customers. So there are times where it's better not to try to scale your data out to make it generalizable, but you have to make that decision based on what you're going to do with the information. What type of respondent will be included is another consideration you really need to think about. And this is something that a lot of people that aren't career researchers don't think about enough when they commission research. So it sounds really good to say, I want to include as broad a group of people as possible so that I can capture all opinions, but that's not very realistic. Let's say, for example, that you are selling model trains, right? And you want to know what consumers have to think about model trains. Well, you're going to be wasting your time talking to about 95% of consumers, because they not only don't know anything about model trains, but they don't care about model trains, and they're not going to be able to tell you anything of use. It's that 5% or less, I don't know how many people actually use model trains, but it's that 5% or less that you do need to care about, because they're the people that actually know something about your product, that have opinions about it, that might actually buy it. And so you need to think about what that group looks like, and generally you're not going to have the amount of time or resources available to screen every single person in a population and go, do you use model trains? If you do that, you're going to get a lot of people saying no, and you're going to have to spend a lot of time trying to find the people that do use it. So instead, you're going to have to rely on some assumptions, like, You know, I would hazard to say most model trains are purchased by men, probably in the age range of 40 to 60, that have a high level of disposable income and that maybe have a background in engineering, not train engineering, but actual engineering, because model train folks tend to like to build things, or maybe other hobby crafts, or maybe they subscribe to certain magazines or go to certain websites. So you can use those criteria to narrow down the types of respondents that you're looking at. And you have to think about that when you're picking your style, because, for example, if you're going to do exploratory research, you need to be able to identify how you're going to get to those people to learn about them. And with descriptive research, you really have to have a good idea, because you're going to be trying to get a large quantity of them. With causal research, you have to know how you're going to be able to set up your experimental design with those respondents and what's going to be required. If they're really geographically dispersed and there aren't very many in the area in which you're studying, you might have to think of other ways to design that study in order to get the information that you're looking for. Finally, it's always important whenever you're picking a design to think about the main purpose of your study. So if your research problem is geared around trying to understand something, you might not need to go with as sophisticated a design of research as if your research problem is really specific and trying to make a decision about something that has really well-defined criteria. So again, you know, the application of the research is just as important as all of these other considerations, and in fact it really should guide you to whether you need exploratory, descriptive, or causal, or whether you need some combination of them, and often you will. Well, with all that said, just one more thing that I want to remind you about, and that is that when you're reading about exploratory, descriptive, and causal, it's important to think about the fact that these can be combined. These can be put together into the same study. There are times where it's cost-effective to get some statistics, but then also to explore what those statistics mean with open-ended probes or with qualitative lines of questioning that augment the descriptive statistics that you're trying to put together. There are times where it's good to conduct a focus group, but also to have a survey before or after that group to try to understand what individuals think before they get into the group dynamics. There are lots of examples like that where these methods and these styles can be combined to yield a better body of research in a single project. So when you're thinking about conducting research, it's always good to think creatively. Understand how these work together, understand the kinds of information that they get, and how can they be combined to get the best bang for your buck. It's something that I always try to work on with my clients. It's something that as you grow more comfortable with these terms and these topics, that I hope you can think about as well. With that said, thank you for making it through Series 3. I hope you enjoyed it. And in our next series, we're going to talk about qualitative and quantitative research, and we're going to go a little bit more detail about their methods and their applications, and we're also going to talk about how you can combine those two to really get a lot of bang for your buck. See you then.